still check my neck every morning to see if the bruises have faded completely. They never do. It's a constant reminder that sometimes the lock on the door isn't meant to keep others out, it's meant to keep you in. The Blackwood Lodge was exactly the kind of place you drove 2 hours out of your way to find. Isolated, imposing, and reeking of history. Its timber walls were the color of storm clouds, and the receptionist, a pale, silent man with a name tag that simply read Jonas, looked like he'd been pressed into service from a sepia photograph. I was there for a much-needed writing retreat. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just a pen, a notebook, and the cold, damp silence of the mountains. Jonas slid a heavy brass key across the counter. It was old school, cut with an ornate, singular tooth, and affixed to a wooden block with the number 307 branded into the side. "We have a very limited system here, ma'am," Jonas droned, his eyes fixed on some point over my shoulder. "This is the only physical key to room 307. We don't have spares, and it's very expensive to replace, so please keep it secure." I assured him I would. The weight of the key felt oddly significant in my palm as I took the narrow, creaking elevator up to the 3rd floor. The hallway was dimly lit by sconces that cast long, anxious shadows. Room 307 was at the very end of the corridor. I stopped outside, key ready, prepared to struggle with a stubborn old lock, but as my fingers brushed the tarnished brass knob, it turned smoothly. The door wasn't locked. It was slightly ajar. A cold jolt went through me. I pushed the door open just enough to see inside. The room was tidy, the bed perfectly made, the curtains drawn against the late afternoon light. It looked unoccupied. Maybe Jonas forgot to lock it after preparing the room? I rationalized, though the thought felt weak. I stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind me. That's when I noticed a subtle scent that instantly killed my logical explanation. It was a sweet, sharp fragrance of bergamot and vanilla. It was the expensive, custom perfume I wore, the one I had only sprayed on my wrists right before I left my apartment 5 hours ago. It wasn't a lingering scent. It was fresh, as if someone had just used it. I dropped my bag and immediately began a frantic search. The small closet, empty. Under the bed, dusty and empty. The heavy, antique dresser drawers, all empty save for the Gideon Bible. The bathroom was sterile and clean. There was nowhere a person could hide. Yet, the smell of my perfume was strongest right by the window, near the heavy velvet drapes. I pulled them open, half expecting to see someone clinging to the fire escape, but there was only a sheer drop to the misty forest below. I stood there, heart hammering, clutching the one key to the room that was supposed to be mine alone. If the door was unlocked, someone must have been here. But if this was the only key, how had they gotten in? And why had they sprayed my perfume? The escalating fear made me decide to leave. I grabbed my bag, but as I turned to the door, I saw a new detail that hadn't been there before. On the small, circular writing desk, centered perfectly on the blotter, was my fountain pen. I hadn't taken the pen out of my bag. I was certain of it. It was a distinctive silver pen that I protected carefully, and beside it, on a fresh page of the hotel's complimentary notepaper, someone had written a single, delicate sentence in black ink. "It smells beautiful on you." My breath hitched. The words were written in my own careful, sloping handwriting. I didn't stop to think. I fumbled the brass key into the lock and twisted it violently until the heavy mechanism clicked. Then, I backed against the wall opposite the door, holding my breath, staring at the unsettling message. A slow, deliberate, scraping sound began to emanate from the other side of the door. It wasn't scratching. It was more like metal dragging very slowly across wood. Then, the rhythmic sound of deep, shuddering breathing pressed against the thin wood panel. I could feel my sanity fraying. I was locked in, with my singular key, but something was breathing on the other side, and it had somehow been inside minutes before. The doorknob began to turn. Slowly, surely, the polished brass handle rotated. I watched in paralyzed horror as it reached its full rotation. Clack! The lock I had just thrown held firm. The breathing outside stopped. Then, I heard a sound that was far worse than the turning knob. A heavy, dull thud, followed by the sound of something large and soft sliding down the door until it rested on the floor. And then a whisper, wet and too close, seeped through the gap beneath the door, tasting the air. "Open the door, honey. I need the key back. It's mine." The voice sounded exactly like mine, but layered with a horrible, wet resonance, as if it were speaking through cotton soaked in water. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stayed pressed against the far wall for what felt like hours, listening to the silence of the Blackwood Lodge and the frantic beat of my own heart. I never unlocked the door that night. When the sun finally rose, casting pale light under the door, the heavy feeling of weight and the awful breathing were gone. I waited another hour before using the key to flee 307. I ran past Jonas at the desk, throwing the heavy brass key onto the counter. He didn't even look up. As I sped away in my car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Jonas was standing in the doorway of the lodge, still pale, still silent. In his hand, he held a small, silver fountain pen. I didn't stop driving until I was 3 states away. The faint, sweet smell of bergamot and vanilla still clung to my jacket collar. And I knew, with sickening certainty, that no matter how many locks I bought for my front door, I hadn't been the first to use the key to room 307. I had simply been the latest version of its occupant. You think you're safe when you lock the door, but the floor, the walls, the very structure of the building, they're all hiding secrets. Sometimes, a room isn't just a space you rent, it's a coffin you temporarily share. We were midway through a cross-country drive, and by the time we reached the mid-sized city of Tulsa, my wife, Sarah, and our 2 children were exhausted, argumentative, and desperate for a flat surface that didn't vibrate. We chose the first familiar chain hotel we saw, a bland, perfectly ordinary place called the Comfort Suites Plaza. We checked into room 412. It was exactly what you'd expect: 2 queen beds, a generic print of a sailboat, and the faint, chemical smell of industrial cleaner. We ordered pizza, watched an hour of cable, and by 11, the kids were out cold in one bed, and Sarah and I were trying to unwind in the other. The air conditioning unit was loud, rattling like a nervous phantom, but it was the silence that broke through the white noise around 1:30 a.m. that first night that woke me. I was instantly alert, a dull, prickling sense of unease crawling over my skin. Sarah was breathing evenly beside me. The kids were silent. Everything was normal, except for the cessation of the room's constant humming activity. Then I heard it. A small, high-pitched sound, so faint I initially thought it was coming from outside the window, perhaps a lost cat. It was a repetitive, mournful sound, like someone trying desperately to suppress a cough or a hiccup. I sat up slowly. The sound was definitely internal. It was close. I leaned over the edge of the bed and pressed my ear to the mattress. The moment I did, the sound resolved itself into something unmistakable and sickening. It was quiet, muffled, sobbing, and it was coming from under our bed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I gently shook Sarah awake. "Hey, wake up. Did you hear that?" She grumbled, half asleep. "Hear what? The traffic?" "No. Listen." We both lay still. The sobbing was intermittent, choked, and heavy with distress, sounding like a small child trying not to wake their parents. The location was undeniably beneath us, amplified by the box spring and mattress. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with panic. "What is that? Someone is under the bed." 1,000 horrible scenarios flashed through my mind. A homeless person, a disturbed guest, or worse, someone trapped. The low ceiling and concrete floor made the sound resonate with an uncanny hollowness. I slid out of the bed, moving with agonizing slowness. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to check, but I was terrified of what I would see. I grabbed the heavy, wooden-handled flashlight from my backpack and flicked it on. "Don't look," Sarah pleaded in a frantic whisper, but the mystery was already too agonizing. I dropped to one knee, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was rattling the floorboards. I pointed the beam of the flashlight toward the dark void between the frame and the carpet. There was nothing. Just dust bunnies, a forgotten bottle cap, and the central support bar. The space was shallow, maybe 6 inches high, and completely empty. Yet, as the beam passed over the empty space, the sobbing intensified. A small, choked gasp of pure fear right where the light fell. I scrambled back, climbing onto the mattress and pulling Sarah close. We stayed awake the rest of the night, listening to the miserable sound taper off into soft, defeated silence just as the sun rose. The next morning, pale and running on adrenaline, I went down to the front desk. The morning manager, a friendly, middle-aged woman named Brenda, smiled warmly. "Room 412. Is everything all right?" she asked. I explained, keeping my voice low and level about the muffled crying under the bed. I suggested they might need to check the foundation, or perhaps there was an issue with the ventilation in the adjacent room. Brenda's smile faded, replaced by an expression that was not one of surprise, but of utter, cold disbelief. "Sir, that's impossible," she said calmly, leaning conspiratorially over the counter. "Room 412 has been completely offline and empty for 3 months. I blinked, genuinely confused. "What? But we're staying in it right now. We checked in yesterday." "No, you didn't," she insisted, tapping something on her computer screen. "Your reservation is for room 411. Room 412 is our dead storage room. We had a plumbing catastrophe there in August, and it's completely sealed off until repairs. We had to remove the beds, the dresser, everything. It's stripped down to the drywall and foundation." I felt a dizzying coldness spread through me. I pulled out the magnetic keycard. "But this says 412, I insisted, showing her the small, printed number. She looked at the keycard, then back at me. Her expression was now genuinely unnerved. "Sir, our digital system doesn't even issue keycards for 412. It won't process the number." I stood there, gripping the keycard, my skin crawling with the memory of the sobbing sound. If room 412 was empty, stripped, and sealed off, then what room had we been in? And more terrifyingly, if the staff didn't even have access to that space, what kind of person, or thing, would be hiding inside it? I didn't wait for an answer. I grabbed Sarah and the kids, checked us out of the Comfort Suites Plaza, and drove away without looking back. A few weeks later, checking my banking statement, I saw the charge. Room 411. I immediately called the hotel. I asked for Brenda. I asked her specifically about room 412, one last time. "Oh, that's you," Brenda sighed, sounding tired. "Sir, like I said, 412 is storage, but there is a very old story about room 411. It's the room right next door to 412. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A young girl," Brenda said, her voice dropping. She used to stay there often with her parents. She always complained that the room was too cold and that the noise from the wall was keeping her awake. She told her parents she heard someone crying inside her mattress. I ended the call then, the cheap hotel phone feeling like a chunk of ice in my hand. I realized that the noise wasn't coming from under our mattress, or even inside room 412. The suffering had been bleeding through the decades, from the actual room we were staying in, and the child who had heard the muffled crying under her mattress hadn't been an unfortunate guest. She had become the source. We all think about the calls that come into a hotel room, but what about the calls that can only come from inside? That night, I learned that sometimes the dead just need help reaching an outside line. The Metropolitan Grand was one of those sprawling, chrome and glass towers that looked impressive from the highway, but felt antiseptic and impersonal once you were inside. I was there for a week-long conference, a tedious, obligatory trip that demanded efficiency over character. I just needed a clean bed and a functional desk. My room was on the 15th floor, facing a sheer wall of another office building. The decor was standard issue. Muted grays, a heavy, unopenable window, and a sleek, multi-line telephone bolted to the nightstand. It was Tuesday evening. I was exhausted, going over the next day's presentation slides, when my cell phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from my carrier. New voicemail message. I didn't recognize the number. It was a local area code, but the rest of the digits were scrambled, reading something like +1 2 1 2 5 5 50 XXX. I figured it was spam, but fatigue made me click play out of sheer boredom. The message started with a loud, mechanical click, the distinct sound of an old, plastic phone handset being slammed down. Then came the voice. It was a low, ragged whisper, high on the edges with panic, and undeniably female. Please help me. I'm in room 308. They know I'm here. He's coming back. You have to call the police. Tell them what they did to." There was a sudden, violent sound, a choked gasp, and the message cut off abruptly with a hollow electronic tone. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The terror in that voice was visceral, not acted. It was too raw, too immediate. I grabbed my cell, frantically checking the number the call came from. But it just showed the scrambled local code. I immediately called the front desk using the hotel room phone. "This is the Metropolitan Grand." A cheerful, anonymous voice answered. "I just received a disturbing phone call. A possible emergency," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Someone left a voicemail from a local number and they mentioned room 308. They sounded like they were in grave danger. Can you send security?" 308, sir? That's on the 3rd floor. I'll notify them immediately. Do you have any other details about the caller?" "No, but the crucial thing is the number," I said. "The call came from a number that was local, but the type of phone..." "Wait a minute." I suddenly froze, staring at the phone on my nightstand. The standard operating procedure for every hotel phone I'd ever used flashed through my mind. "Before I dial an outside line on this hotel phone," I asked the desk, my voice slow and measured, "what's the prefix?" The clerk chuckled slightly. "You need to dial 9 first, sir, then the 10-digit number. If you're calling another guest room, just dial the 4-digit extension." "Right. And if I don't dial 9 first and just dial a 10-digit number, what happens?" "It gives you a busy signal or redirects to the hotel operator, sir. Our system is closed. It's a PBX. You must dial 9 to access an outside line." I hung up, not bothering to explain. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I replayed the voicemail. I checked the call logs. The scrambled number was a 10-digit local number, not an internal hotel extension. But the phone system required a 9 to reach any outside line. If the call had originated from a hotel room like the distressed voice clearly implied it had bypassed the 9 prefix. It had reached an outside cell phone using only the 7 digits of the local number, something the hotel's own desk staff insisted was technically impossible. I knew I had to check room 308. I couldn't ignore the chilling immediacy of that voice. I rode the elevator down to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quieter, the carpet thicker, muffling my footsteps. 308 was halfway down the corridor. I hesitated outside the door, my ear pressed against the cold wood. Silence. I finally summoned the nerve to knock. 3 sharp raps. After a long pause, the door cracked open. A man, mid-40s, unremarkable in a polo shirt, peered out, irritation etched on his face. "Can I help you?" he asked, annoyed. "I apologize. I'm in 1502, I stammered, scrambling for a believable lie. "I think my cell phone charger might have fallen out of my bag on this floor. Have you seen anything?" He sighed. "No, haven't been out all day." He started to close the door. "Sir," I interrupted quickly. "Is everything all right? Was there a disturbance earlier?" He gave me a hard, suspicious look. "Everything is fine. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm working." The door shut firmly. It was anticlimactic. The room was occupied. The man seemed ordinary. I felt foolish. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the PBX system had a glitch. I walked back towards the elevator, ready to dismiss the whole thing as a strange fluke, when my cell phone buzzed again. Voicemail. I checked the number. It was the same scrambled local number. I immediately pressed play, my throat constricting with dread. This time, the audio was even shorter. All I heard was the labored, desperate whisper, closer than before. Why did you knock? Room 1502. You should have just gone back to your room. He knows now. And then, a sound that made my blood run cold. The distinct, loud click of the handset on the room phone, the very sound that had opened the first voicemail. I didn't go back to 1502. I sprinted out of the hotel lobby and drove 5 hours straight until I was home. I still don't know who was calling or what they did in room 308, but I know this. That voice had access to something that didn't obey wires or dialing prefixes. And the only way the caller knew my room number was because they had somehow read the destination of the call I made to the front desk. I finally understood the impossibility. The call wasn't meant to go out to me. It was meant to be routed through the phone system, and the only way that closed system would allow a non-compliant 7-digit call to escape to an outside line, bypassing the 9, was if the call originated not from the physical phone in room 308, but from someone trapped deep within the digital heart of the Metropolitan Grand's phone exchange.